We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Of course, if you're a fan of this show and if you've been listening to the Lions of Liberty podcast for a long time, for several years, then you're definitely going to recognize my guest today. My guest will be none other than former Lions of Liberty podcast flagship host Marc Clair is coming back to the show. So really excited for you guys to hear from Marc. We get into some interesting topics, talk about the transformation that he's gone through, journeyed through over the past few years, and excited for you guys to hear that conversation. But I want to remind you that there is a bonus segment at the end of this that you can access if you're a member of the Lions of Liberty Pride. Of course, you can join the Pride on Patreon or Locals by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. And also want to remind you that this episode of Finding Freedom is brought to you by Masa Chips. Do you love tortilla chips? Do you love tortilla chips with queso? Do you love them with salsa? Do you love eating them plain? Well, I have news for you. We have an actual healthy tortilla chip here with Masa Chips. They are tortilla chips fried in grass-fed beef tallow. They are delicious. Just with, you get that hint of that beef flavor on the chip, dipping it in the cheese and the queso. So good. So delicious. So delicious. You can get 10% off of Masa Chips by going to masachips.com and using promo code LIONS at checkout. And recent guest of this show, Doug Stewart, he recently bought some Masa Chips and gave me a personal review. He loves them. So be like Doug, go buy some Masa Chips. And let's get to today's interview with Marc Clair.
Man.
Welcome. I'm joined here today by a special guest, somebody you might remember. I know it's been almost a year, but Marc Clair returns to the Lions of Liberty Network, former host of a little show that we used to call the Flagship Show here on Lions of Liberty. Actually, the founder of the Lions of Liberty podcast, and now the host of the Marc Clair Show. Marc, welcome back, buddy. Welcome back.
Odie, I know exactly what you're thinking, and yes, I'm ready to roar.
I made it a point to not ask you that, but I'm glad you're ready to roar.
That was really just for Brian. That was really to upset Brian.
Brian would get so angry about that, and it
he really didn't like the catchphrase. That's the main reason I laughed. Ultimately, I think.
I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't like it. It's actually, I don't know. Some people got real into it, and some people made it pretty awkward.
Convention. People say, "Hey, I'm ready to roar." You know, people remember it.
Yeah. It worked. But so this is the first time you've come back on. You weren't on Brian's show, were you? Since you,
yeah, I've been waiting by the phone, just waiting for that thing to ring by the old Lions phone, and finally it rang, and it was Odie on the other side. Now it's my first time back. It's nice to see. Nice to see you guys are keeping the place, in somewhat of an orderly fashion.
The lights are still on. That's how I gauge things.
See, you're even branching off. I do tune into the meme wars on occasion.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Meme Wars probably soon enough here will probably be our most popular show, which I'm fine with. I like the Meme Wars. It's a short show, 15 minutes. If that show takes off and we can do a 15-minute podcast.
See, Odie, that's how good I am. I've been here like 3 minutes and I'm already promoting for you.
Plugging. It's the Marc Clair way. So speaking of plugging, Marc, of course, has his own show now, the Marc Clair Show. And I wanted to have Marc back on to Yeah, I know he's talked about it on other podcasts, but I think I know Marc pretty well. So maybe we'll get into some different areas, maybe get a little deeper in some areas. But I want to talk about his transformation that he's really experienced, gone through over the past 3, 4, 5 years. I'm not sure when it started. I think I have a pretty good idea when it started. But before we get into talking about that, I have a question about your show, your new show. And I mean, you've had some pretty awesome guests, a diverse set of guests. Jim Breuer, Ole
Diversity
Dammegard.
is my number one virtue. That's what I've always said.
David Gornoski, who's been on my show, great guy. Really enjoyed that episode. Chris Knowles, Tucker Max, Father Turbo Qualls. I'm just curious because I mean, your guests, it's a wide range from conspiracy to spirituality to, I don't know, just interesting people. What do you look for when you're looking for guests nowadays?
I think a lot of it, at least initially, is and has been what you kind of mentioned a minute ago, is just sort of the theme of transformation. I think a lot of my guests have, if not all of my guests have in some way gone through some sort of transformative period in their own lives, which has drastically changed their own worldviews. And that's the kind of stuff that I want to explore with the show. I do, like you said, explore a wide range of subjects, but if you kind of zoom out a little bit and maybe you wipe away the subject line and you look at the stories themselves, I think you'll see a relatively common thread between a lot of them, which it's in some ways purposeful, but in other ways sort of providential. A lot of this show has from the beginning felt to me like it's just sort of come together. It started with just the very vague idea of feeling like I needed to do something different, feeling like I had been too bogged down in the politics. As you know, I spent a lot of those last few months with Lions of Liberty doing a lot of arguing, a lot of online arguing, some even in podcast form. And it just started to become something that wasn't fun to me anymore. And when something stops being fun, like either you got to reignite that passion, refine whatever made it fun in the first place, or you got to move on and pivot to something else. So, which is, of course, what I did. And I think there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of different subjects I do tend to cover and do want to cover. Religion, the cringy term spirituality. Somebody that left a review on mine said it I think best. He said spiritual without being cringy. So I guess that's sort of what I'm going for.
Yeah, I actually hate the term spirituality. I don't know why I said that, but it's just like trying to explain, I guess, a wider, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess
faith,
it's a term that I'm trying to express something broader than merely religion, because I'm not per se pushing a religion. But I guess we haven't found a better word yet. Just like Buck and I have not found a better word for journey. I guess transformation is almost like what I'm trying to say when I'm talking about journey. They're like transformative. Well, they're transformative journey.
Yeah. When I hear the journey, I just think of the song. So, it's
Don't Stop Believing, baby. It works.
Yeah. Can't stop believing. Never stop believing. So let's start down this road, this transformation road. And, I think a good place to start, I think maybe where this transformation sort of started for you was with professionally for you, right? With the job that you had, at least in a way. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's start there. And you can take it in whichever direction you want to. But, turn back the clock to 2019, 2020. You're living in Los Angeles. You're working in, I don't want to say the name of the company, but you're working in production. And some things happened with the vaccine, and your life ends up being uprooted. So take us through that moment in time when that change happens. You have to make a decision. You have to make a stand. And then to where, just you can meander where you want to, but I'm trying to keep it professional for this segment here. And then how you get to where you are in Florida.
I've talked about this enough that I know how to do it with all my legal situations in mind, because there are legal situations involved. At the end of the day, it might have really started somewhat earlier than that, probably even a little bit before I met my wife, but obviously like meeting my wife and really changed my priorities in life in many ways. So I think that shift was already there in a sense, but when everyone knows what happened in 2020 happened, especially when the V issue came up, I I kind of had this, it's weird because I went on a vacation to Florida where I now live in April. I want to say April of 2020, because even back then we were talking about moving here, even before all these mandates and what they did in Florida to sort of rebuff those mandates came into play. So probably talking to Tho Bishop helped, and just seeing that I knew people who were in Florida just having a good old time while I was quite literally locked in my house in Los Angeles. So we were already.
You met your wife in 2019 then? Is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. Yep, correct. And
all right, so the two of you went to Florida to visit Florida. Is that what you're saying?
We were already married at that point, I believe. I believe we just got married in late 2020. So yeah, this is 2021. So we were already married, and so of course we had our mindset on, our family, and she had her son that we were working on his immigration for. So we had a lot of factors that weren't in my mind when I was just a single guy living in Los Angeles who just didn't really care about much, to be honest, more than going out, getting drunk, meeting chicks, and doing my podcast and telling everybody how all about freedom, because I was so free because, hey, I wasn't tied down to anything, and that's freedom, right? Sure. Or it's just a different kind of slavery. We can get into all these things, I suppose. Yeah. But what I think what it really came down to, when I came back from that vacation, I remember distinctly people at work, a lot of people were just out of nowhere coming up and saying, "Did you get your vaccine yet?" Because it was like right after it became available to sort of like the general public. And I remember that striking me as such a strange thing. Like it sat with me so wrong, and it was happening for like every day for weeks, to the point I was just so goddamn sick of hearing about it. And I was never going to do it because my wife and I had talked about, we're like, why are people just sticking this thing in them when it takes like years and years and years to test these things normally, like just on based logic. It wasn't even, there was an ethical component to it, of course, but even before the mandates came in, we were just saying like, why would we be doing this for this thing that obviously, based on our age and all that, has virtually no chance of harming us. So that was already kind of in our minds, but I still never had the mandate thought hadn't really come to me. For some reason, I just thought, oh, well, they'll never really try to force people to do that. Because at that company, I was at the mysterious company, they had tried to do a flu mandate the year before. And I pretty much just straight up said, I'm not doing that. And they said, okay. Like it was nothing. So in my mind, I was like, well, they're pretty good with like, if you push back, they'll back off. So I was like, even if they try to do that, like they were chill about the flu vaccine. So I'm sure they'll be chill about this. Boy, was I wrong. Needless to say, when that all came up, they weren't chill. They weren't chill at all. But I did some things that I needed to do, and that I was within my rights to do to not take it. Let's just put it that way. They responded in a way that I didn't feel fair. So I sought some legal guidance on the matter, and legal guidance I received. So I can't really say too much more about where it went after that, but I never took it. I'll tell you that. And let's see, what else can I say? I didn't end up losing a penny. I can say that, I think.
So when did you move to Mexico?
For 9 months. I didn't end up losing a penny.
Well, that's I think that tells the whole story. So you stood your ground,
right? Because I didn't know I wasn't going to not lose the pennies, and so like for all I knew, I wasn't, and I was ready to not. But I would have felt really silly if a part of me if I did it and saw the future timeline somehow where I didn't take it and still ended up essentially in the same place.
Well, I know you've talked about this on your show. I've talked about it a little bit on my show as well. But like when it comes to choosing your suffering, and sure, like when you fast forward the time and everything you went through, you ended up not losing a penny. You were able to recoup whatever you lost you would have lost during that time. But you suffered during that time, right? It wasn't easy. But there's other people choose their suffering. They took the V, and a lot of people ended up having, adverse reactions. Who knows what the future could hold years from now, having that still in the system. Hopefully nothing. I mean, I hope people that took it are going to be fine. Hopefully we're past that point. I have no idea. I'm not I don't have a background in biology to even understand that stuff. But choosing your suffering is something that I think a lot of people, especially libertarians, just really don't understand, I don't think. Especially, and I was going to hold this off for later in the show, but
good luck
there's a
trying to rein me in.
recent episode you did with Adam Patrick, which was a really fascinating episode. A lot of it was talking about orthodoxy, but there was one part, I think, in the beginning where you were talking about libertarianism, and I think it was you that said this and not Adam. I might have it backwards, but that libertarianism is more of an anti-worldview than a worldview. And I just found that really interesting because I think that really sums up the problem with libertarianism in that it's so reactionary, saying, well, this is wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong, but there's no solution to it. So what are your thoughts on that? And if you want to expand on, I think it was you that said that, kind of what went into informing that opinion.
I'm actually not sure which one of us said it first, but I think we both agree with the statement, so we'll roll with it. In many ways, if we're to talk about a subject that comes up a lot of my show is to put it in a religious text, I guess you could look at it kind of like Satanism, which is just or even atheism, I guess. They're just their entire worldview. It's not really a worldview. It's just another worldview. It's anti-God. It's anti the Christian God or whatever it may be. So that's not a worldview in and of itself. I think what Adam described as was like a commentary. Like it can be a critical commentary on the events of the day, politics, what have you, and be very true in its criticisms. And I say it's not a thing. It's human beings that take a philosophy and do whatever they will with it. But what a lot of libertarians often aren't doing is actually trying to take lessons from that philosophy and then enter the real world, enter the actual arena of life and apply the principles for real. And what struck me so much during what I was going through, I was so silly, I guess, that I just assumed that because I was a libertarian and everybody I was surrounded with were libertarians, that they all believed in, this bodily autonomy, not in the cringe abortion way, but, believed in individual rights and self-determination. And surely that group of people was going to 100% not comply with mandates, even if it meant that even if they wanted to do it, they just obviously none of these people are going to comply. And yet I was turning around left and right, and almost everyone, there are a large number of people that didn't, of course, but a much higher percentage than I thought would, which I thought would be close to zero. I just found complying in every way imaginable. And it really struck me when it really made me realize that the commentary of libertarianism, the anti-worldview, it does not actually provide most people anyway, that sort of that positivity of here's what you should do. Here's how you should react to a situation like that. It doesn't give them the inner strength to stand strong on its own. Just being angry at the state. If you want to be angry at the state and angry at all the politicians, but you're going to turn up your sleeve the second you're threatened, then I think that it's not providing you really anything positive at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've talked about that a lot too. There's so many libertarians that waste all their time, going to conventions, and we've talked about this, and I mean, you've talked about it on your old show. When your one famous rant that you did, but wasting time at conventions, and they don't have money to buy a house or buy a car. I think we've beat that to death. But to get back to transformation, I think a really interesting transformation that I've noticed with you, and you kind of talked about a little earlier, but going from single life to being in, and not that you weren't in relationships before, but being in a relationship, getting married, having well, I wasn't going to say it, having a son. And if you could just, a stepson, if you could just speak to the shift in that perspective, because I think, I'm one of those people that thinks a little bit conspiratorially in that I think the government is trying to incentivize or keep men, especially young men, from getting in, committed relationships, getting married, and having children, because I think it does change your perspective on life. So did it really change your perspective on life?
The government's one of the forces doing that. It's one iteration of it, but I think it's coming in all sides. Even just down to things like the Me Too movement and things of this nature, where I've seen a lot of women saying like men don't even approach them anymore, and a lot of men saying I don't even want to approach women anymore because I don't know, I might be charged with rape or I might go to jail if I just like do what think is some innocent flirting or what have you. So I think there's so many societal pressures that are disincentivizing men, especially when it comes to like family court, divorce court. You know, they can look at all the layers of, well, first of all, if I even talk to this person, they might, claim I'm mean toing them or what have you. And then if I go in through these other steps, look at all these monumental and very true things that could happen if it goes wrong. The deck is just completely stacked against men in so many ways. So I completely sympathize with men that are just like, screw it, I'm just going to be single and just get whatever I can get and have fun. I sympathize because I was one of them for a long time and didn't really think I needed or wanted more. And, I'm not going to get into all the details or really maybe any of the details, but, early on, I think in my relationship, we went through some tough things with my wife's health that were really made me think about life and death sooner than I had ever thought I would in a relationship. And so even before we had planned to get married or any of the stuff that we're doing now, having a family, etc., I was really faced with like very high level sort of situations that made me think about things in a totally different way. Like basically having someone else who at times their life was in my hands. And of course, extending that now to her son and what have you, it just completely flipped around my priorities. And I think this is something that Dave Smith talked with me about on one of my last Lions Liberty episodes. I say this too. I say like just having fun as a single guy, going on Tinder, getting laid, what have you. I say just having fun, but Dave said like, I think the fallacy is thinking it was actually fun.
Right.
Now, of course, it was actually fun at times in moments of an evening or what have you. Of course, that is fun in a sense, but
very shallow fun.
It's very shallow fun, and at the end of the day, it's like going out for a night of drinking when you have like 12 Jaeger bombs. I know you and I have been in these situations before. It's fun. Now maybe that the recovery when we're 19 wasn't so bad, but if I do that now, I guarantee I will have a fun night and I'm going to have a horrible week. Like now it will be a week if I did something like that. So yeah, maybe there are glimpses of what is a good time, but is it fulfilling your soul? Is it slowly destroying your soul? Just like if you do 12 Jaeger bombs, but you do it every night for some years, as I did at one point. That's slowly destroying your body. So you can slowly destroy your soul with some fun, some unfulfilling fun, slowly destroy your body with some unfulfilling moments of fun with some substances. You can do all this, but recognize it's not fun in the grand scheme, because your life isn't actually getting better. You don't have any more purpose. And I used to not think that mattered because, well, there were probably times in my life I didn't think I needed a purpose per se, but at some point you realize, I must, because I found one. I have one now. It's beating the drum of liberty. It started off really with Ron Paul, and holding him up and I love Ron Paul, holding him up as our savior essentially, and then just converting that into whatever iteration of the Libertarian Party antics was going on, all the while. I know what drives libertarians to go to these conventions, and it's mostly, for the most part, it's a sense of purpose. It's looking for a sense of purpose. It's the idea, as misguided as it may be, that you're doing something, that you're guiding towards something. And that's why even at these conventions, people will, at the end of the day, if you really peg them down, will say, yeah, it's not about winning this election, even though we're going through all this effort to elect people to positions and decide who's going to run for. Yeah, it's not about winning the election, which tells you everything you need to know. Because if it's not about winning the election, it is for another purpose. So everyone's looking for the purpose, even if they don't want to admit it. I probably wouldn't have wanted to admit it, but I was certainly looking for it, and I grasped onto it and held super tight to it for a long time. But was I fulfilled during that period? No, of course not.
Did you hear Ron Paul's appearance on Tim Pool's show? It was like a month ago.
I can't handle that show anymore.
Well, I'll summarize. I'll give you the best. I'll give you the best. Maybe most surprising part. There was a moment
where
I
tried, but yeah, no.
I can't stand Tim Pool either, but I wanted to hear Ron Paul on there to hear some of the dynamic. But it was towards the end of the interview, I think, and Ron had to go to the bathroom. It was kind of awkward. He just got up and he's like, hey, he's leaving. What's happening? But anyway, he comes back in the room.
He's 80. He can't do a 3-hour show. Right? I can't do a 3-hour show.
I gotta pee. And they're asking him while he was out of the room, they were talking about Dave Smith running, and I don't think Dave's going to run, but at the time they were thinking he could run a libertarian ticket and maybe make some noise. And they asked Ron when he gets back in the room, like, what do you think of Dave Smith? You know who he is? And Ron's like, yeah, I know who Dave is. He's like, what do you think of him running for president? Do you think he can, make a difference? Or I forget how they phrased it. And Ron Paul said, at this point, it doesn't really matter. He said essentially something like that there's nothing, like, the system is so broken, it can't be changed. It was just so interesting to hear him say that. I don't know how much, like, he is still investing his own resources and time into politics. I guess not very much. I know he does his podcast, talking about current events and things, but even Ron Paul gets it. It sounds like it, but then, and I love Ron Paul too. There's all of these people who follow Ron Paul, and everything Ron Paul says is the gospel. He just said it's not going to make a difference, yet everyone's still investing their time in it. But I thought that was interesting.
That even seems a little bit different for Ron Paul than what I think he might have even said like 15 years ago. He might have said, well, it's great to have somebody, be the standard bearer, holding the torch of liberty and just reign out. And so now he's just kind of like, what's the point?
Well, I think essentially the way he addressed that was the time has passed that you can make that difference. Like,
it's like, you had your shot with me. All right. And you miss it. Yeah. So
I was the only one, the last one that could have saved you. So you were talking a little bit about, I did want to touch on, there was a post that we were talking about Buck again, Buck getting free plugs here left and right, Buck Johnson, Counterflow. He had a post up talking about AI, and you were just talking in your last comment there about, really the Me Too and these different things and men not approaching women. And Buck said something to the effect of a year from now, maybe it was 3 years from now, there's going to be a large percentage of men who just have AI girlfriends. Mm-hmm. Is that something you think is reality, is a possibility?
Yeah, it's already a thing. I forget what if you Google something in suicide, like chatbot suicide, there's a specific name of a chatbot that you can Google. But anyway, it wouldn't be hard for you internet sleuths to find it. This is already a thing that's happening on some level, where people are falling in love with these chatbots and then having their heart broken because it's not actually a fulfilling relationship any more than watching porn is fulfilling or what have you, even or any more than even just have hooking up with random chicks on Tinder is fulfilling. But at least those are real women, at the end of the day. I as much as I can say that's not fulfilling, I'd be much happier with someone running their way through Tinder. Well, maybe I shouldn't say this. I don't know if I'd be much happier, but let's just say it's a lot healthier to have relationships with real people than it is with an AI chatbot. At the end of the day, I think that's a pretty fair statement. So yeah, it is already happening, and I think a lot of the pushback Buck was getting on that is I believe he did say a year, and a lot of people were saying. Some people were saying no way, but a lot of people were saying, well, probably, but not this fast. Come on. And he was just like, there's stuff that's happening now that people, said 5 months ago would take 5 years. And to me, that was kind of like a lot of what I wanted to talk to with my recent guest, Maurice Sachet, because he believes the singularity has passed. And the idea is once the singularity has passed, meaning AI can start doing its own thing, essentially, then the pace at which this stuff can multiply is just, we can't fathom it, because when humans are the ones that are accelerating the pace of technology, at the end of the day, it still does take human man hours, even if it's humans that working on a microchip that then goes fast, it still takes human man hours to put into replicating things and making them more efficient or what have you. AI has no such limitations. Algorithms don't go to bed. They don't need to sleep. They don't get tired. They don't need to go out for a coffee. They are just going, and they're going at light speed. So the rate that this stuff can accelerate and the rate that people can adopt it, I don't think we can even really possibly fathom that. So I hope Buck is overly pessimistic here, but to me, it's absolutely realistic. To me, it is just a matter of the only thing to argue about is time at this point.
Yeah. And
not the white pills I was hoping to dish out here, but
if you really think about it, the amount of men who are addicted to porn, online pornography, I would guess it's much higher than 50%. And a lot of these men, obviously,
I mean, yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
What's
I said I'm watching porn right now. That's a joke. Or is it? You might not know. But it is a joke.
a lot of these men, they're married, right? They're still married. So essentially, you could have married men who have an AI girlfriend. I mean, so yeah. I could definitely see it happening with. I mean, I don't know if it's a year. I don't think it really matters what time you put on. If it's a year, 5 years.
Especially
the point is, it's
you and I
not good for humanity.
We're just talking about chatbots. Like, imagine when it's not a chatbot, it's your VR headset and a very realistic interactive experience. That. I mean, I'm just talking about chatbots. So if I think that can happen with chatbots, if the technology gets better than that, which it will. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah. So, I mean, at a certain point in time, do you just like VR? You're like, I'm just not doing VR. How do you protect yourself from it?
Yeah, I mean, our son wanted to get a VR headset and we pretty much said no. So yeah, I guess I don't like it's one of those tough things where it's like, I don't want to be the crotchety old man who doesn't, who thinks whatever the kids are playing with now is extra dangerous. But I think a lot of kids nowadays and people nowadays are, forget just kids. I mean, forget just gaming and kids. Like every human I see is just on their phone, just scrolling away. So it's the same concept. It's the dopamine addiction from whether it's from a game or from. And I am not like excluding myself from this. I try to take a lot of steps to, have certain time when I'm not doing these things. Especially a lot more than 5 years ago. When 5 years ago I'd wake up, literally just turn that puppy on, open Twitter, and off to the races, baby. And next thing I know, it's like an hour later and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? So, and even if I get up and I'm productive after that, you're in the completely wrong mindset to start the day.
It's funny you say that. I don't know why I remember this, but I remember a Facebook post I made probably like 5 years ago because I was trying to stop doing the same thing, trying to stop scrolling when I woke up. And I'm like, does anybody else want to, make a commitment for the next 30 days to, not look at your phone for an hour after you wake up? And I remember you commented something like, why would you want to do that? That's like the best part. You wake up, you look at your phone, you get to see
Did I say that? I can see myself saying that. That's how much I've changed, Ernie.
Exactly. The transformation of Marc Clair continues. So let's continue down the transformative path. I think for me, like one of the coolest aspects to watch of this is, I referred to it earlier as spirituality. It's probably not the best word for it, but I think faith or beliefs or just really opening your mind up to a higher power, potentially being out there, seeing you. I remember when, I lived in California for a short time and, we would hang out and talking about, I was a Christian at the time then, I'm a Christian now, talking about God. And I'm not sure where you stood exactly. I think you were more agnostic, maybe leaving the door open.
I think I was one of those annoying people that said they were agnostic, but then when you have the argument, it's all atheism all the way. I think that was my deal.
But so like growing up, when did that start for you? Like were you always sort of that way? Cause I know you grew up in a Jewish household. Did you go to synagogue growing up?
Yeah, I did go to synagogue growing up. I even went to Hebrew school after school a couple days a week to get ready for my bar mitzvah, learned Hebrew. I guess we read, I don't think I ever read the Old Testament as in like from the front to back. I think we like read excerpts and talked about them and things like that. But I think I don't want to throw my mom under the bus. I love her very much, but this is a true story and I've told it on podcasts before. So here we go. We were, my parents were religious and we did like the main holidays, but it's not like we didn't go to synagogue like every week necessarily. It wasn't like that kind of thing. It was kind of like we do the holidays and we have some other celebrations when it feels like the thing to do. But we always did Yom Kippur, which is where you fast for 24 hours. And Jews don't really have the concept of sin in the same way, but it's essentially the idea that you fast for 24 hours and it like washes away your bad deeds is kind of the way it was spun to the kids anyway. It's like this clears you for the year. This wipes your slate and you're good. I'm like, okay, doesn't sound like that bad a deal, I guess. I've been kind of an asshole kid this year. I guess I could do that. But the part of the thing too is like if it's young kids, and I'm not sure how old I was at this time, maybe 8 or 9. Like young kids could eat because you don't want to like starve your kids. So it was just like the adults that would do it. So my parents would fast. And I remember one time we stopped to get me McDonald's on the way home because I was the kid, so I was allowed to eat. And my dad like went into a store or something like that. And then my mom turns around and she's like, let me just have a fry. I can't blame the woman. McDonald's fries are incredibly tempting and amazing. But I remember that moment and I remember immediately thinking to myself, oh, she doesn't really believe this, like really, really at a deep, deep level. Because if you really believe that it was such a serious thing that it's going to affect your afterlife, like you're going to wash all your bad deeds away, like just all you have to do is not eat for a day. If you really, really believed it at your deepest core, like you wouldn't have a fry. You wouldn't throw that away for a fry. Are you kidding me? So that's just something that struck me as realizing, okay, this is like a thing we do. And it's a culture. This is our culture. But there's a gap there to me. And so I think I'm not just blaming it on this one incident. This was already something that I think I think I always kind of saw it as like stories we were learning to teach us lessons, that sort of the Jordan Peterson the way in some ways. I just didn't appreciate it even in that way back then. I just thought they were essentially silly stories we were told to, they were just like Santa Claus or whatever else may be. It's just things you tell kids. And then when you grow up, you eat the fry because you know that it's bullshit or what have you. So I think I was always a little bit skeptical of things. And I always considered myself somewhat of a quote unquote truther, another very cringy term, but before that was even a term, like there was a reason Fox Mulder was my favorite character on TV, because he was there to get to the truth, to get to the bottom of things. And that just really appealed to me, appealed to maybe whatever side of me also sort of rejected religious narratives, or not rejected them per se, but because it's not like I was hardcore. I didn't really make it my identity, but I was definitely always skeptical. And I always thought, how could X, Y, or Z really have things right? How could anybody know? So anybody that really tells me they know, I would just think you're full of nonsense, because just because you know means you don't really know. So I don't take you seriously.
Quick note on McDonald's fries before we move on. Delicious. The reason why they're so good, they actually used to be fried
Don't tell me it's fried like a baby fat or something.
They used to be fried in beef tallow back in the day. And then, cost cutting, obviously, they're trying to maximize their margins. Now they just add beef flavoring to their fry oil, probably like canola oil or something terrible for you, which still makes them not vegan or vegetarian. I don't know if they advertise that, but it's probably in the small print somewhere. But
and it's that smell.
Vegan somewhere.
They brainwash us with this stuff at a very young age, and now for the rest of my life, when I see the arches, which I don't want to go in all these directions. Some would say is an occult symbolism of the arches, but whatever. We don't have to go into that. When I see the arches or I smell that smell, I instantly, every thought I have about whatever food I am or am not eating at that moment briefly goes away. And I don't usually act on it, but once in a while, if I'm having a rough day or my guard is down, that wheel turns and suddenly I'm in the drive-thru. It's very rare, but it happens sometimes.
Suddenly, if you sat in a parking space and shoved a Big Mac down your mouth and you're in a full sweat, what happened? What happened? Happens to the best of us. With me, Wendy's is mine. I'm not a big McDonald's guy.
That used to be mine.
McDonald's makes me sick. So continue down this path. The shift. I'm assuming this didn't happen all at one time for you. So, when did you start? I know you've talked to a lot of people who have who are Orthodox Christians, and I know you've become pretty interested in that. But when did the door kind of creep open for you to be like, you know what, there might be more to this story here that I'm missing?
Let's see. Where could I really point to? I guess if I'm really gonna point to a moment, I think, because even before the story I'm about to tell you happened, even before this, I was starting to sort of on my own start to take, and I actually do have to credit Jordan Peterson for this a little bit, because I got into Jordan Peterson's sort of Bible lecture series, and that actually got me to take that step of taking it seriously, taking it as okay, still in the sort of material way that he kind of does, where it's okay, but there's real allegory here, and there's structure to these stories, and they do okay. So I started to respect them more. And then as I did that, it made me think, well, okay, if I can take this more seriously, maybe I can take the works of other religions more seriously for whatever they might be trying to say. So I kind of gave myself a little bit of a religious studies class on my own. I just started kind of reading more religious texts, reading more about religions, including Christianity, because that was the one for a while I kind of shunted it aside, because I was I already know about all that. I went to those Jewish classes and we had the Bible stories. I know what that's all about. It's just that stuff plus Jesus. It's not that complicated, but obviously I've learned there's a lot more to it, and it is a very different religion really than Judaism in many ways, even though they have somewhat of the same foundation. So yeah, needless to say, I think that my mind was open to it more. But if I'm to be honest, and what's the point of coming on Finding Freedom here if I'm not going to be honest? I think what really put me all the way on the other side was my DMT experience. When I did DMT, I believe it was in 2019, and I had already done psychedelics of various kinds. I had done mushrooms and other things like that, and had experiences that were pretty wild and pretty fascinating, but still to the point of just oh, here are these substances that make something funny happen in my mind. Okay. DMT is not like that. DMT is not like that at all. DMT is just here you go. We're going to throw you into the spirit world for a minute and just see what the fuck happens. And that is, that is an experience that I can't necessarily say it would be wrong of me to say I recommend it, because I actually, the more I've sort of learned about this stuff, the more I think it is dangerous to dabble in that stuff. That disclaimer being said, I share a commonality with people who have discussed this oftentimes this ends up in the smoke filled room. It's kind of the bonus segment of my podcast, as you know, as a premium subscriber to the Marc Clair Show. But let's see who has told me a similar story. Cyprian is one of them. David Patrick Harry, another one. They both had, it was not that they were, I think they were both taking religion somewhat seriously when these things happened, but it was on ayahuasca journeys that they both essentially came to the full revelation of where they are now, essentially, or sent them further down that road. So very much so for me, I think just encountering the spirit world and realize and seeing things like perfect geometry and just seeing the code of the universe and that sounds very cringy and spirituality hippie right there, but it is what it is.
So just to pause on the DMT for a minute. So what do you think about someone like, and there's a lot of people like this, I'm sure, someone like Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan likes his DMT, who gets thrown into that world and still he's seemingly very atheist, or maybe he leaves the door open and he is agnostic. Maybe, I'm not sure, but
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't listen to enough Rogan now to like tell you what his religious outlook is. It's hard for me to really wrap my head around what it is. I mean, he definitely like recognizes that you're seeing something that other people can be seeing in the same place on the same thing, and acknowledging things like machine elves. And if people are all experiencing these things, to me, that's showing there's something being experienced. It's not just a series of random hallucinations that people happen to dream up. So can't really say I have the answer to that. I think there's a lot of directions you could go from that stuff. I think maybe I went in a better direction. I'm not saying Joe Rogan's gone in a bad direction necessarily, but I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that, except I'd love to interview Joe Rogan about it if you have any contacts and dive further into it with him. But I would find it hard to believe, if you dug down to what he thinks after doing all that he would be an atheist in the sense of not believing in anything spiritual or anything beyond the body. I would be pretty shocked if he believed it to that extent. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he is an atheist and more he doesn't subscribe to a particular story, which that I can totally understand.
So you have the DMT experience. You're at the same time starting to look at religious texts. How do you first start to become interested or talking about or consuming Orthodox Christian content? How did that begin for you?
It's a good question. I got to think about that. Well, no, I think I could probably point to, first Pete did a couple interviews with Cyprian in like early 2020 when all this stuff started to go down. Then I had him on my show. And then at one point he said like, all right, I'm kind of done with podcasts for a while. I got to go do some software coding. And I was like, okay, I won't. Cool. See ya. It's been fun, everybody. Like a year of Cyprian on podcasts. And then a couple months later, he had this book that came out. And he started talking about, it seemed like suddenly he was back and really passionate about a lot of things. So I had him on my show again. And I asked him like, hey, like a few months ago, you said you were going to like ride off into the sunset, but now you're back. You have a book. Like what exactly happened here? And he entailed that he had recently converted to Orthodox Christianity. And he kind of told the story of how he sort of vaguely started praying every day. And then he had the vision of, founding the Bitcoin Mystery School, through which he met Father Turbo Qualls, who ended up becoming his spiritual father. And so that was where I first I never even heard of it before. I had no idea what it was. So that was where I first, I guess, heard of it. And then as this whole, everything about the whole, I guess, what you might call the post-libertarian split or whatever you want to say happened in all the libertarian stuff these last few years. A lot of the people I ended up, you might say, hanging out with or agreeing with a little bit more. We were in like a group chat together, and there's certain people that some of us just started congregating together, and you can probably guess who those people are by just seeing what podcast we were all on together around that time. But then as I started to like get to know some of those people better, suddenly it would be like, oh, this Buck being one of them. Suddenly, like one day, Buck's talking about how he's decided to convert to Orthodox Christianity and become a catechumen, and then also Matt Erickson, same thing. I'm like, oh, hi. He's one of the people I'm talking to. And now then Adam Patrick, same. And I'm like, what is, and then Tommy Salmons. It's like all these people who I'm, for different reasons, or at least I think different reasons, really seeming to share a lot of the same convictions with and be really on the hippie way to put it would be who I'm vibing with the most. People who I'm vibing with the most were just suddenly turning out to be Orthodox Christians. I mean, some of them already were, and I didn't know it. Some of them were converting. And then this kind of continued even into starting my show, to the point that I think there's a number of people who subscribed to my podcast in the early days who thought they were subscribing to an Orthodox Christian podcast, not realizing they're talking to some hippie half agnostic Jew that is the host. I would say definitely not really close to agnostic anymore. Well, no, I guess I am probably agnostic, because I don't necessarily fully subscribe, even though I'm talking about right now how I've vibed with Orthodox Christians, and I've ended up having a lot of Orthodox Christians on my show. Never been to church. I would not call myself an Orthodox Christian at all, because I don't practice that, and I'm not even sure that is the truth, but I think there's a lot of truth in it, no matter what, because this is the kind of stuff I am constantly in a process of trying to work out and wrap my head around. But I think to get to the bottom of like the way I've quote unquote transformed, it's not because I found a new religion to subscribe to. Although I will say, like, I think Seraphim Rose is like my new Murray Rothbard. I'm just kind of obsessed with his writings and his books and his outlooks. What I have noticed though is
Saturdays, new show coming to the Marc Clair Show. Saturdays with
Seraphim. to replace the old Mondays with Murray. Saturdays with Seraphim. What I have found is a lot of the Orthodox viewpoint, and I'm not even saying that it's only the Orthodox. There might be other sects of Christianity, Catholic, whatever. Those aren't the ones that I've been reading, so I don't know them. So I'm not commenting one way or the other. But from what I've been reading and seeing with a lot of Orthodox commentaries, they do explain a lot of what you see happening in the world. Especially, I mean, Seraphim Rose's books on the New World Religion, how he's talked about UFOs and how all of this is part of the one world government, stuff that libertarian sort of centric truther type people have been talking about for decades. It actually puts all of this stuff that I've always been immersed in, since I was reading anything, I was into like the conspiracy world and all this stuff. It ties a lot of things, that even UFOs, cryptids, it ties a lot of things together almost into what could be a cohesive worldview. So a lot of it, I don't know if it's true, but it gives an explanation for a lot of things that I've always been curious about in a way that I haven't found anywhere else yet. So it hasn't driven me to find a spiritual father or even seek out an Orthodox Christian church or anything like that, but it has led me to certainly respect it as for whatever it may be. Cause either it's very true or it's capital T true. I don't know which, but either way, it's certainly something. I will say that.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, like I said earlier, I think that this from what I've seen, at least externally, seems like the biggest shift in your transformation, and I think a lot of the rest of it kind of falls in line with it, at least from my perspective. So we've been going for about 45 minutes. I'm trying to think if I want to continue this or just get to the bonus show, because I do have some interesting stuff I want to talk about on the bonus show. Some conspiracies. I want to do a little. I'm just going to tease it here because we want people to join the pride, right? Or at least I do.
High-level teaser.
I still do. I join your Patreon.
I wish you success. Yeah, I want them to join mine and yours.
Yeah, I got a little list of conspiracies. I want to do a little rapid fire, getting Marc's opinions on that in the bonus show. So let's end this now. But first, let's get the Marc Clair plugs. Your podcast, your Substack, everything you got going on, where people can find that.
My Substack that hasn't had a word typed on it since probably October of last year. I've kind of let that slide a bit, but I still want you to subscribe because someday something might happen there. So that's marcclair.substack.com. Really the easiest thing to do. Easy as long as you spell my name properly, which I will do for you right now, is to just go to marcclair.com. That has links to everything, all of my video platforms, all the podcast platforms, all the support platforms, my other podcast, the Second Print Comics podcast that I do with our friend Remzo Martinez. So everything there at marcclair.com. That's marcclair.com. That's really just the easiest place to go. One-stop shop.
All right, Marc Clair, his triumphant return to the Lions of Liberty Network, man. Rawr. Thanks for coming on. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Marc Clair, and I hope you are going to be heading to the bonus feed to hear the bonus show where Marc and I get into some conspiracy talk, some interesting conversations there. So definitely be sure to check that out. Be sure to support Marc with his new show. Subscribe to the Marc Clair Show on whatever podcasting app you're listening to. And while you're doing that, if you haven't subscribed to this show, the Lions of Liberty Network, do that. Or Finding Freedom. I have a solo feed where you get just Finding Freedom episodes. So if you just want to share just my show, or if you want to just listen to my show, you can subscribe to Finding Freedom with John Odermatt. And yeah, that would be awesome. Would love to have you as a subscriber. So really, the only other thing I want to talk about today before I let you all go on your way is we are heading to PorcFest. Brian and I are going to PorcFest in, man, a little bit over a week, which is crazy. We'll be heading up on Wednesday of that week, and we'll be there Wednesday night, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday for a little bit in the morning, and then we're heading back home on Saturday because I got some stuff I got to do the following week, so I need to be in town on Sunday. But really excited, and you know the guests that'll be up there. Some of the speakers: RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramsworthy, whatever his name is, the GOP candidate. Just interesting that there's, people from outside of the libertarian spectrum, but excited to hear from RFK Jr. and going to try to interview him. Fingers crossed. Hopefully we can get something lined up and get a quick minute with RFK. But yeah, if you're going to be there, hope to see you. Come say hi. We're going to have a tent with Matt Kibbe, Lions of Liberty tent, along, share a tent. We'll be doing live podcasts there. We're going to do a live LALDL. Brian's going to do a live Meme Age Daydream. I'll do a live Finding Freedom. Lots of fun stuff. I assume we'll do a live Meme Wars. It's not on the schedule, but we'll have to fit that in for sure. So yeah, Meme Wars is catching on, guys. Meme Wars is catching on. If you haven't listened yet, pretty much every Friday we have a Meme Wars show. We'll say 3 out of 4 Fridays we have a Meme Wars show where Brian and I or a special guest go through just recent memes and videos and different noteworthy things we talk about on Friday. But it's more of a lighthearted show to launch you into your weekend with a little bit of laughter, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of lightheartedness to ease you into your weekend. So be sure to check that out. And that's all I got. Have a great week this week, and I'll talk to you next week. And always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.